Picture this. You're going about your day, just doing the job that you were hired to do, and then all of a sudden you get pulled aside by a coworker and you're told that your biggest rival is arming themselves against you. And not only are they arming themselves against you, they're arming themselves with weapons of mass destruction. Take a moment. Think how you would feel in this situation. Well, if you can imagine how you would feel, then imagine how President John F. Kennedy must have felt in this situation. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a 13-day standoff between the United States, Cuba, and the Soviet Union based on lots of different things that we will dive into. And to this day, it is still one of the most discussed cases of crisis management of all time. So in 1959, the Cuban government was overthrown by Fidel Castro. Now, before Castro came into the power, Cuba and the U.S. had a very close relationship. The U.S. was very prominent in Cuba's economy, relied very heavily on Cuba, and the same went for the United States. Like, Cuba had a lot of ties with the United States. However, this changed whenever Castro came into power. He began to rely heavily on the Soviet Union. And at the time, the Soviet Union did not have good relations with the United States. This was at the time of the Red Scare. People in America were afraid of communism. And so, this is why we did not want Cuba associating with our biggest rival, the Soviet Union. And so, because of this, Cuba eliminated their relationship with the United States. Now, whenever JFK was elected for president, he called for the removal of Fidel Castro. He tried invasions and they failed ultimately. And this caused tensions to grow between the three countries. And so Cuba was in turn removed from the Organization of the American States by John F. Kennedy. And then the Soviet Union, in retaliation, began sending military equipment to Cuba. And this is whenever the construction of missile sites began in Cuba. Now, this marked the beginning of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the 13-day crisis. And just to put into perspective how dangerous this could have been for the United States, Cuba is only 90 miles away from the coast of Florida. A very, very short boat ride. And just to show you, I have this picture from Time, and it shows the many, many different spots that these missiles could have hit. You have Chicago, Atlanta, Washington, New York. Very, very major United States cities that would have been big targets. And so, whenever these sites began to go up, the Kennedy administration had to react. And so they debated many different ways to handle the conflict. Some of his advisors wanted to go more extreme and wanted an airstrike or another invasion attempt. But some thought you should lay off, not do anything at all, just see what happens, try to let it blow over. So ultimately, the Kennedy administration decided to use a naval blockade. They saw it as a middle ground between taking extreme action and not doing anything at all. And so when Soviet ships would come in to Cuba, they would have to go through a United States naval blockade and be searched for weapons. Again, this caused tensions to grow, but eventually the Soviets did allow the U.S. to search their ships. And eventually, 13 days after the crisis initially began, the United States and Cuba and the Soviet Union found a compromise. This all began whenever Cuba decided to build missile sites in the Soviet Union decided to build missile sites in Cuba, but at the same time, the United States also had sites in Turkey. So, in exchange for the US promising not to launch their Turkish missiles against the Soviet Union would not launch their Cuban missiles against the United States. And once again, to this day, the Cuban Missile Crisis is a widely studied event of crisis management and is still heavily, heavily analyzed.